This is Jesse Hensley.
This is Josh Turner.
And this is Chris Bow.
Welcome to Turn Down for What?
Welcome back to Turn Down for What? Today we will have a beautiful conversation about several relevant topics, including but not limited to potentially hydrogen and otherwise. We would kind of dialoguing around it. There's so much different things that we'll just kind of hit what we can get and make it work. So anyways, just wanted to kind of touch on some of the news articles that happened this week. And then obviously we can be highlighting any additional stuff that kind of populates following. But one of the first things that, kind of was announced as of the 16th is basically Ram now has basically their ProMaster Electric van, which has come out. And its intent is to be the electric rival to what Rivian and what Ford has done with their cargo transport vehicles. It seems as if Ram's product, from what I'm understanding, basically would have a 12-foot length, 13-foot extended variant, but it looks like it's going to make it about, with a 110 kilowatt battery, it'll make it about 162 miles around town, which I'm not 100% certain about the competition with the Rivian and stuff, but I know that it was about that same. I know at one point in time, I think, Chris, you and I had discussed the Rivian offering and that you had seen it, but I think it was about the same offering as less than 200-mile range.
Yeah, and then, I know we've got here at my location with FedEx, we've got the E-Transit from Ford, which is kind of in that same zone category. So, doesn't sound like it's anything transformative necessarily, kind of the same restrictions that a lot of these vans have, which is it's a whole lot of air to push out of the way when those bricks are going down the road. I know we've experienced it when we go up over the Santa Cruz Mountains here with ours. So it's better off on the kind of the flat roads and the local city communities. And again, like any of our EVs, the faster you go, the worse hit it's going to take on the range and wind. Those things are like giant sails. If you get a crosswind that hits the side of that thing. But yeah, for a lot of routes, people know their routes. They know how many miles every one of their fleet vehicles goes every day. So they know where to plug them in and what routes they fit into. And so there's a great number of use cases where that amount of range is perfect. And they go back to the depot and they plug in. And that's the way we do it. During the winter right now, we precondition the battery so it's ready to go when the driver gets here and gives you the maximum amount of range, and it definitely makes a difference when you do that. So it kind of sounds like it's right there in alignment. It's funny how often that occurs, right? Whether it's Cybertruck, whether it's this example, it's easy to get excited. And then at the end of the day, engineering and physics is engineering and physics. And it all kind of lands in the same general neighborhood, it would seem, until some new technology comes and really transforms it. It kind of just sounds like it's going to be just another option,
Now, if you bought those, if you had 5 or 6 of those, would you still call it a fleet, or would you have to call it a herd since it's from Ram?
Are they called a herd? As a flock of seagulls, herd of sheep, Ram? I don't know.
I don't know.
A murder of crows? Yeah, I don't know.
Murder of crows.
Yeah, I had the same concept around if you get a dozen like Mustangs together. What do you call that? Rodeo?
Stampede?
I mean, what do you? Yeah.
You call that a lot of people jumping out of the way when they start to leave the car show.
That's great.
Anyway, all right. What are we talking about today? On the news articles, we had that. Obviously, it's cold. Everybody realizes it's cold right now, and that's going to have an effect on batteries. I've seen a lot of people post about not getting a lot of range, and that is one of the downsides to electric vehicles. Not only that, but your charging is going to be slower. That's part of the winter life. I've went through it already, one full winter with mine. I did see a difference, probably 20%, maybe a little more sometimes, depending on its temperature. But it is what it is. Not much you can say about it.
Yeah. I think especially for those people in the cold, I think that there's things that you can do in the cold weather to prepare yourself. Preconditioning is important when it comes to the battery. And I was talking to somebody today and they were questioning the battery efficiency in the cold weather and saying, well, those type of people wouldn't want to use a supercharger. I'm like, actually, warming the battery isn't necessarily a bad thing when it comes to uh, that regard when it's cold outside. But with preconditioning, I mean, obviously you have your range, and you're going to see a dip in that range with any vehicle, EV battery. But it's one of those things that if you take good health things with your battery, like warming it up before departure with preconditioning steps and things, you can optimize your range. And then obviously, you're still expecting a reduction, and that is, a variable to consider. But, for the average person, unless you're taking a road trip, it's not necessarily the end of the world. It's just something you have to plan on. But I think you would lose less range with the appropriate preconditioning steps than otherwise. So,
and because of that, we ended up having different uses for vehicles when you lose power. And I think, Josh, you had that happen to you, didn't you? Didn't you have a use that ended up getting looked by somebody?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, 2 days ago we lost power at my house, and 3 days ago, the guest speaker we had, Ben Westby from Colorado, joined us. Was it Colorado? Yeah, joined us, and he was putting on his Twitter, basically, or X, I should say, his use case of top of the mountain, off grid living. Using his lightning for, basically heating his house in a blizzard up in the mountains of Colorado. And this intense, like, look at the pro lights helping me scrape snow off my generator, like doing all this intense stuff. And
full
I
zone
lost
lighting.
power. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I lost power, and I was like, you know what? I want to make a pot of coffee and do a puzzle with my wife, because, it's the middle of the day and I couldn't work because I didn't have the internet. And I was like, I'm just going to do a puzzle with my wife. She was like, but I want coffee. And I was like, ta-da, I have an idea. Hauled. So two things. I didn't post about the second one, but one, my 1-year-old needed to take a nap, and she's used to having a sound machine, and it was one of those things, you can't run the sound machine. We didn't have the battery operated one or anything, so I ran an extension cord from my truck upstairs and plugged up the sound machine, plugged in a little space heater, had her little camera plugged in, and her nap was sponsored by the F-150 Lightning. But in addition to that, once we got her down, I was like, let's do a puzzle. And then all of a sudden I turned on and just took the coffee pot and plugged it straight into the truck. And I took a photo of it and put it up on X, and Jim Farley retweeted it this morning.
That's awesome.
But yeah, no, it's, I mean, just the silly practical uses of having a big old battery bank sitting there is, I was able to, I don't have the full, pro power with the, power your house. I didn't pay for that setup because I don't lose power that much. And it was really only out for like 2 hours probably. But it was still enough time that, there was practical life things that I wanted to do. And so I just ran an extension cord and did it, and power turned back on, and I was getting off my back. So just kind of a cool, fun use case. You can see the picture I uploaded to X at my link there, but that was still a unique little use case for the Lightning in that regard. But
last thing, because we need to keep going on it, is that if you want to try a Tesla right now and you want to get a used Tesla, right now is a good time to do it, because there are several on the market from one of our national rental companies, Hertz. And I've seen them as low as a little over $15,000 for a Model 3 with 60,000 some odd miles. Not a bad price for $16,000 if you want to start in it, get you an extended a warranty for the battery, and see if you like the EV life.
Yeah, I mean, the obviously with the sale of used vehicles, that's something we talked about. There's not really a robust market of used EVs, and so this gives the opportunity for a consumer to go in and buy a not that old EV with, I mean, it's a formal rental, but I mean, to get a vehicle with less than 100,000 miles on it for $15,000-$20,000, and I'm sure there's some additional credits and things depending on the state that you live in to purchase a vehicle like that. I mean, that's something that's a slam dunk no brainer for somebody to get an introduction into the space without having to spend 60,000-70,000 on a brand new EV.
I believe it is, you get 30% up to $4,000. So if I remember the correct way of doing the
But
calculation.
I'm sure with
30%.
Chris in California, there's probably additional
Oh, yeah.
credits
Yeah.
above that if I was to guess.
Yeah, you could probably get
Yeah.
it for free if you did enough work on it.
there's
Somebody
different
did that, you know.
different income requirements, different incentives. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely good deals to be had there, and it's an interesting story, man. It's an interesting story from so many angles because there's the obvious kind of narrative out there of Hertz went and got all these EVs and look at them, they're gonna have to sell them all and they're expensive to maintain. And as is always the case, the media doesn't really do a good job of digging deeper, and I wish someone would kind of do a more long form story on it, because there's that stuff that's surface level kind of out there and kind of grabs the headlines and makes you click, and some people get that like schadenfreude right feel, for those that are anti-EV.
Very nice.
You're right. Yeah, and that kind of gets out there. But then when you dig deeper, there's more to it. And there's some of the narrative is true. Some of that is there. They had some extra expenses and it didn't really work out, I think, the way they initially envisioned it. And I think there's similar examples with Lightning, right? They thought, oh, we're gonna do 150,000 of these, and then you're like, let's pull the reins back a little bit. Didn't quite turn out the way we envisioned it. We're seeing a lot of examples of that. But I think with Hertz specifically, and I've had a lot of experience with them because, when I've traveled and gone to, Arizona and Vegas and Dallas and Memphis, and every time I go, I try to get an EV. And when I book it, it wants to charge me extra. So right off the bat, I'm like, I'm not going to book extra. What I'm going to do is I'm going to book the regular one because that's what they're going to approve. And then I'm going to show up. And you know what I'm going to find? I'm going to find a whole bunch of EVs sitting there. And I'm going to go to the manager. I'm going to say, look, you got an EV sitting there. It's not going anywhere. And I know you're not doing anything with it. Would you upgrade me for free? And every single time they have. The only time I haven't had an EV was out in Tennessee, oddly enough. They didn't have any in the fleet.
Well, it's got a Hertz.
It's got to hurt. Oh, I see what you did there, right?
Whoop.
Yeah. Gonna get you to replace Tom Brady with his love hurts, right? And so, yeah, I think that there's a factor there where the markets are different. California is different, and Arizona is different. Texas is different, and there's a bunch of places they probably put these EVs, and they obviously should know their market, and they probably put it in some areas where they didn't move. But one of the other things they did there is they also had a program through Lyft or Uber, and I can't remember which one it is, where there's rideshare companies you could rent it from Hertz, and you were doing long-term rentals and pounding miles on rideshare. And the rideshare market just takes a beating. I mean, you can look at some of the posts that Talik has done as a rideshare person, or any of the stuff that's out there where people drive it for their work, and you're putting a lot of road miles, a lot of grind on those. And so how much of it, not all of it, of course, right? But how much of that cost is because they were renting out under that I think it was an Uber program where rideshare people were using them that way. And then the other thing is, I've got a district manager that travels. That's like what he does every week, 3 days a week he's on the road. And he's actually in a Kia Niro today, called me up, and he gets a Hertz rental EV everywhere he goes. And he's had a number of different ones. And, on one occasion, he rented a Tesla that didn't, it wasn't set up for payment, right? Their payment system. So when they went and plugged into a supercharger, it wouldn't activate. And so Hertz isn't known for, for setting themselves up for success either. He had a Subaru, a Solterra that came here one day, and I talked, I think, previously about this. They only had him with a third of a charge in his battery, and he was going to San Francisco after work. And so I literally plugged him into the Lightning and gave him enough range to get to San Francisco and then back to the hotel again that night. So, I think there's a combination of things there that, did Hertz put it in the right markets? Did Hertz rent it out to Uber drivers that were going to pound on these things? Did Hertz do a good job of pricing it? Because the whole idea here is that if you're pricing it as a kind of a premium, there's a lot of people that are going to already not want necessarily to try an EV, and now you make it a premium. So how much is that hurting it? And then their own employees not knowing it very well, not setting it up very well, giving people things that aren't charged, that aren't set up for payment. I think if any one of those things is probably a bad idea, but you combine them all, and how much of that is, what we're seeing in the headlines.
I mean, if you look
at somebody like Tesla going out and doing their own rental program for their own fleets, because they're going to know, it'd be kind of like us, Power Up America, going out and doing the same thing, because you're going to have people that understand that there are people that want to do that. They're going to know the problems that they have, and they're going to make sure everything's charged as soon as it comes in. You know, right now in that market, I think we are a niche type system, but it's about to get a big boost in the arm once you start having the ability to charge wherever you want to charge, and you're not going to have to rely on the kindness of somebody in their lightning to give you enough juice to get to where you need to go. You're going to have, you know, the ability within 50 miles of anywhere to know, hey, I can get to this charging unit, and you're going to have 4 or 6 or 8 there to charge. Now, once we have the opening up with the Tesla market, to where I can use Tesla superchargers, that's still going to open up so many more highway corridors that I can charge at with 150, or it'll be 170 for us, because that's about the highest I've seen is 180 on mine that I've charged with. So they're up to 250. So even as the systems change in our trucks, I'm sure the T3 will have a 350 or maybe even a 400 charging rate, because that will be the next generation of these vehicles. I could easily see that there'll be a specialty company, or some of these companies become specialty in just EV rentals for the people that care about it.
I think it's one of those things that you have to deal with, you know, like you were saying, Chris. I mean, there is, for a company like Hertz, there's logistics to offering EVs that I don't think that the company was prepared for. The idea of, you know, just offering an EV is great. I mean, we went up and I used a Hertz Tesla when we went on a road trip, and we went and drove from Buffalo, New York up into Canada to Toronto and back. But there was no direction on what to do, how to do it, how to charge. And so all of the logistics of that, I mean, obviously I've driven EV, so I was able to figure it out. But, you know, to charge a premium, like we're saying here, to charge a premium to then get the same, to get issues with tech, with plug and play, with charging technicals, and not having a real plan there makes it difficult. But then we also had in our network, you know, some of the airports and stuff that we've spoken with, their car basically rental companies are looking at, well, we need charging infrastructure to charge the vehicles back, because not all of these dealerships have the appropriate network. So even when they return the vehicles, they may have a charger, but if they have a fleet of 6 vehicles, they can't charge them quick enough to turn around and rent them. And so it just makes a logistical headache when it comes to turning and burning them. Now, that doesn't mean anything against the EVs in general, like to drive them and things, but as a car rental company, there's a lot of extra considerations that aren't necessarily impossible to overcome. It's just a matter of, you actually have to have that consideration of, here is a guide of, hey, you rented an EV, here's the next steps with us of what to do. Set up this profile with our Hertz account, and the vehicle auto link to all Tesla chargers, and here's how to find the network. Download this app. Like, they just don't have any directive. And luckily, because we know we drove, but those random people are just going to pick up a random rental. They're not going to have the knowledge of, oh, well, let's try the EV. Now what? I had a buddy of mine that went to Colorado, and he rented an EV and was like, it took me a minute, but I was able to kind of figure out that, like, how to get the thing and drive, and the fact that there's no start button. You just drive, you know, in the vehicle. Once you walk in with the key, it's on. And it's like, those are the kind of things that he just had no clue. And, you know, there's just not enough education going with it. And that's something that obviously practically needs to be, you know, considered.
It's funny. The number one question I get from my district manager every time is he likes the one pedal, and he oftentimes will get into the EV and the one pedal's not on. So it's like, how do I turn this one pedal on? Or he calls it the creep. How do I get the creep to stop? How do I get the one pedal? And, you know,
tell him to stay home.
Yeah, I asked that to Jesse frequently. He never answers the question.
I knew you were going to say something. Well, speaking of the education side of things, we've kind of hit on alternative fuels. I'm going to go through this quickly because we've already went most of the time that we kind of had allocated for this. But I do want to get a vehicle, Christopher, that you have in your area. We don't have any around here, which is the Toyota Mira. Now, the Toyota Mira is the hydrogen vehicle. There is no hydrogen in Tennessee. So we're actually, with what we're doing, we're looking at creating not only the distribution centers for that, we're also looking at the production of it. And I want to let everybody know kind of what we're looking at before we get into the details of the car itself, because basically what you're looking at is you take the liquid hydrogen and you create through its fuel cell the ability to create electricity with the off material as water. So you're basically got water coming out of the tailpipe. And you get your electricity, which will run your electric engine, kind of like a hybrid. But instead of a small gas engine, you're running your power through this hydrogen process. Let everybody kind of know what the systems are. There's three types of hydrogen. You have blue, gray, and green. Now, we're going to be doing the electrolysis style, or we're going to attempt to do electrolysis style in Tennessee through green hydrogen with solar, and then utilizing, those resources to create the hydrogen here in Tennessee. The other two are, I think, to use methane. I can't remember the term, reforming, I believe as it is. I can't remember. I have no notes in front of me, unfortunately. I should have opened them up. But you're basically using natural gas, and there's two different systems. They're the same for blue and gray, except for blue, they actually capture the carbon. So you got the CCS, which is carbon capture systems, and storage. Is it systems or storage? I think it's storage. But you're basically capturing the carbon out of it while you're doing the process to create it out of natural gas. Again, that's a lot of work to do. We have some companies in Tennessee that do it. There are a lot of gains to this. So you can charge up a car in 5 minutes, I think, from empty to full in 5 minutes, and you're getting about 400-mile range with this Toyota that they have out. And the Toyota is about the same price. It ranges, 50,000 to 65, 70,000. I have a picture of it. Hopefully we can put it up here. And that is kind of what some of that different technology is. And before I, got into this, I wondered, is this something that's going to survive? Is this something that could go? And the more I research this, the more I like the idea that this could be an alternative fuel as well for running these electric engines. So even though we're doing the battery tech and everything, and there's a lot of upsides and downsides, the ability to throw the natural gas into, or the hydrogen in one of these vehicles and use that same drive line, use that same system, means you're not duplicating a whole bunch of different technology for that electrification of the vehicle. And then the other aspect of this that's making it really interesting for us is obviously we work on aircraft programs. We are looking at electrification and charging networks for EV aircraft throughout not only our state, but 7 or 8 other states. And there's a new company that has made this aircraft. It is the Cirrus Aviation's view or version of one of their aircraft. Now, this thing, looks like Formula One because of Formula One people that's working on it. You have 1,150-mile range for the business class. You have speeds up to 323 miles an hour. So everything that is about that is very, very good. And those ranges and everything are very typical for aircraft. And the cost is going to be about a quarter of what you would be on regular aircraft. So it's saving money. It's saving it's saving carbon out of the atmosphere, which is one of the aspects that you want out of something like this, a new tech. And, at the end of the day, it's quicker and it goes further. For Joby, which is one of the companies, great company, theirs is, I believe, 150-mile range or somewhere around that for their aircraft. And I think it gets up to 200 mile an hour. They're more for that last destination,
Yeah, I mean, the top EVs are all eVTOL, vertical takeoff landing, and all of the best ranges you're seeing are 200 to 250. And so to have a hydrogen solution that provides a clean energy opportunity that goes 1,000 miles opens up the space a lot more. And you're seeing a lot of progress down that space. I was actually reading a news article today, and it was talking about, I gotta find it, but it was talking about the company that basically they're currently researching right now. It's right here. The company was Zero Avia. And they are doing the same type of thing down the vein of hydrogen, but they're looking at like basically cryo compressed hydrogen, and then that's able to basically utilize longer term. But you're not seeing as much of a hydrogen movement on the roads. It's there, but it seems like EVs have kind of taken over the roads. But it seems like there's a lot of interest in hydrogen solutions for the sky. with the value that it provides and things like that. So it's kind of curious to see some of these solutions that are brand new tech coming into this space and how it's impacting the space as a whole.
So,
feel like
Christopher,
for
how
me-
much hydrogen do you see out in your way?
Yeah, there's a company out here called True Zero, and True Zero has about a dozen and a half of these hydrogen fuel stations all over the Bay Area. And so there's enough of them, and they get kind of a range similar to what a traditional gas vehicle would, that you can go to these and fuel up. And there's not a whole lot of hydrogen vehicles. So I've seen one at an EV event out here, the Toyota, that I've seen. And there's just not a lot of stations necessarily in your neighborhood, right? You've got to seek them out, and they're scattered throughout the Bay Area, a lot in San Jose, a lot in the peninsula. Um, and then I think that where you get yourself into trouble, though, is when you try to travel with them, because when you get up to like Highway 5 that transitions between the Bay Area and LA, there is nothing along the I-5 corridor. You get out to the 99, and there's a little pocket south of Manteca where there's oddly like 3 or 4 stations there. And then you got to go all the way down to Fresno before you hit more stations again. And I think hydrogen is an interesting solution when it comes to replacing diesel. That's when you're talking about those high power, whether it's aircraft, whether it's big construction machinery, whether it's diesel trucking, especially where they've got to idle it out here. We've got the Port of Oakland, where you have a lot of trucks just lined up, and they have rules that you can't idle your truck because you're just but those are solutions that battery electric or hydrogen I think are great for. Hard to me, and obviously I'm partial to the battery as an individual. I've got solar panels, I've got battery backup at the house, I can fuel my car every day. It's hard to imagine a hydrogen tank at my house. How's it going to get fueled? Is there something that can create and extract and store hydrogen in a self-contained kind of way, the way that they have water purification that can take humidity out of the air and create purified water? Is there some way to create hydrogen in a self-contained unit that's affordable at the house? A lot of these things for me it's tough. It's like seeing the Dodge come out with the Dodge Rev, and it looks like a concept car, and you look at it and you're like, it all sounds great, except that it's never going to happen. Not to be that guy, right? But it's when I hear a lot of this hydrogen stuff, it's like the hard part is it took that cult of personality like Elon Musk to almost get battery electric out there into a place where it was paid attention to. Who's going to be that champion for hydrogen? And I don't see that person on the horizon. And
I'll be there in a minute.
You should get up there.
I'm all right.
Yeah,
I'll be there. Yep.
So
and like I said, I think the hydrogen space, it's going to have a space in the vehicle industry. And I think that you're seeing some of the federal fund opportunities going to grow the network, especially among trucking. I think that's where you're going to see a lot of the hydrogen. But if hydrogen is used to fill trucking corridors and to deal with aircraft, and that's the solution for it, and the vehicles stay down the EV vein, because it makes more sense, like you're saying, to charge your EV at your house and to not have to have gas stations everywhere for hydrogen. I think logistically that's something that there's a coexistence between the two. It's just a matter of finding the niche and filling it. And like I said, I think that trucking could really vastly benefit from it. And there's several aircraft providers that are currently working on the hydrogen or hydrogen electric space to potentially provide that. And if it is able to, the problem you deal with aircraft is weight of batteries. And so having hydrogen systems that can bring those type of things to produce good power saves space and saves weight when it comes to the generalized production. So just an interesting point that, obviously there's a lot of development still to come in that space, but there's definitely a lot more EV vehicles on the road. But as you're progressing, there's really no traditional takeoff and landing airplanes that are electric. But there are that are hydrogen now that are currently being research tested and used. So it just showcases that hydrogen in that space is a lot farther developed than electric is. Doesn't mean that there's not a space for both, but that just means that right now, I mean, there's some big opportunities in that space that a lot of people aren't even aware of.
Yeah, and the thing that got my attention on this was the fact that I was reading an article from Road and Track, and it was talking about how many of those mirrors, which I didn't even know that Toyota mirror existed. So I was looking at it, and last year, 2023, there were 27 and 2,737 sold. So, that's still a pretty good number. 2,700 hydrogen vehicles from Toyota sold, and there were just 2,652 Toyota Supras sold. So it outsold the
That's
Toyota
funny.
Supra, and I would have never have thought that that would have been the
Yeah.
case. So that's what kind of got my attention was it's more popular than, one of the biggest name brands, in my opinion, of any Toyota is the Supra. I've always loved the Supra. I'm not a big fan of the latest one they came out with, but still yet it outsold it. So, and I would say 96% would probably be in California because you have that infrastructure already in place.
Yeah, the Bay Area especially is well positioned for that if you're just talking about local commuter stuff, for sure. Yeah. I
Well,
think
that's all I have about that part. What else is there?
uh,
I think that's a good wrapping point for today. I mean, obviously, unless you have a note, Chris, but I think that there's a lot of progress that's going to be happening now in that space. There's a lot of upcoming information that's coming in the very near future when it comes to hydrogen and electric. And I think that we're like we've discussed several times, we're at the beginning curve of those things, and we just have to continue to watch that evolve and see the space grow. Because I mean, there is plenty of movement happening that is behind the scenes, but also that is actively happening public facing that the general public is going to have benefit from.
And
yeah, I think the
go
last
ahead.
thing I wanted to kind of mention that was out there was the announcement at CES with Google saying that Android Auto was finally going to get implementation with our EVs for charging networks and knowing our battery status. I'm a big Android Auto person. A lot of people are Apple CarPlay, and they already have this. Apple CarPlay did this first, where it integrates into the Lightning and the Mach E, and currently my Android Auto doesn't. And I actually I tried. I have an iPhone as well, and I tried that in the truck, and I just didn't care for Apple CarPlay. Just one, because the GPS on it takes up a smaller. It either takes up the whole big chunk of the screen, and then I don't have like my podcast or my music available there to sort through and hit play on. Or if I bring that widget up, the widget takes up a big square, whereas Android Auto is just like a little button. And so with Apple CarPlay, you've got kind of one square that is the GPS, and then you've got two smaller squares that are like the weather, I think, and then your music. But the GPS is too small for me. And then when I expand the GPS, the music option just goes away. And with Android Auto, when you expand it, you get little buttons that are small buttons that you can sort through and you can look at. So I prefer Android Auto, but and I just don't care for the native GPS at all that's in the Lightning. So I was super excited, selfishly, for Android Auto to start to support that. So just my own personal, like, hey, this is coming, this is cool.
Yeah, we can get into that in another episode of the software and hardware value that all these vehicles have, because there's some announcements that's been made where Tesla is going to be doing their own data centers and their own communication systems. Obviously, Ford's hired a lot of people for their backbone communication system as well. And when you start looking at the value of that data, even though it's Apple CarPlay and Google systems, that is something that I think all the automakers are trying to kick out for using, and then use their own, because they figured out that's $25 billion each that they could potentially get out of selling that and using it to make their own systems better. And I don't know any company that would say no to $25 billion. And if they do that, there's edge-based co-location data centers ran by hydrogen that potentially could be used to support those infrastructure needs there in Tennessee with Power Up America. The last thing I have.
Nice connection. Love it.
Yes. So Maryland's requests for proposal for the NEVI program has started. So if you are out there wanting to build charging stations, Maryland is now your spot to go look at if you want to go and apply for the state to do it. So I would definitely encourage anybody out there, if you want to get into this industry and you have the the urge to own it and try to do it, go look at some of these places that have this on their website. Go look at Maryland and kind of research it and see if you could put a proposal together, because it's everybody that can in those areas, and there's a good chance that you might have an ability to do it that others can't.
Well, that'll be it for this week. We'll continue more with a more extended dialogue and things, but it's a good little brief episode this week to kind of get some highlights of the news and stuff covered. And we will see everybody next week.
Go Niners this weekend.
Ooh, my
Go
people
Niners.
are out. Thank you all.
See you guys.